All right, thank you all for coming to the March San Francisco Customer Success Meetup. If you guys are returning, thank you very much for returning. We always kick this off with something special, so a lot of times we bring the community together to help people kind of connect as well as find opportunities in careers. And so I want to start this off by saying, who here is hiring for a position within customer success? Stand up. If your company is hiring for customer success, please stand up. All right. So for those of you that are looking, look around. All of these companies are hiring for customer success people just like you. So please talk to them just after the panel. So we are really, really excited for this panel. This is something we've been thinking about, dreaming of for about a year now, and there's two thank yous that I want to start off with. And so the first one, I want to actually start off and thank John. So John actually spent the last 2 months organizing this panel and putting this together. So a round of applause for John. And then another big thank you for KeepTruckin for hosting. This is a brand new office. I think you guys just moved in a week ago. So big thank you to KeepTruckin for hosting us and welcome, and for all the food and the drink and the hospitality here. And so I'm going to turn it over to KeepTruckin CEO, Schwabe, who's actually going to talk a little bit about what KeepTruckin does and why they're so excited to host this meetup.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you all of you for coming and joining tonight. This is a new space. We're kind of getting settled in, so it's nice to kick it off with you all. So let me start first of all by just saying thank you to John for organizing this and all the panelists for coming here. They all have some great experiences, both from the operating side and the investing side, and have seen and applied great customer success in their organizations in the past. And hopefully soon they will impart their wisdom. Before that, I'll tell you sort of about KeepTruckin, just so you have a little bit of context and how we think about success, because it really is integral to our company. It has enabled the progress we've made this year and what we will make in the future. So KeepTruckin, in short, is essentially connecting the world's trucks. We build and have developed a fleet management platform for trucking companies. There is a sort of core regulatory requirement which we target. Drivers of commercial vehicles that drive long haul are required to do logs. And we started with a free application that let drivers do logs on their phone. And eventually there was a regulatory mandate to essentially use an electronic logging device to record logs. And so we used that as an opportunity to build a hardware platform and a broader fleet management platform for trucking companies. And commercial fleets of all types eventually over time. And we've now extended that platform to be able to deliver additional functionality beyond just the core sort of compliance requirements. We get into telematics, vehicle intelligence, helping fleets make better decisions, better understand their operations. And then ultimately, we're extending into the actual transactional element of trucking, the movement of goods. We have connected hundreds of thousands of trucks now, and we now have a network that we believe is highly valuable from a marketplace perspective. And so that's the next stage of the company. It has been an evolution. And just to talk about sort of the importance of customer success, we actually built or started building our success team before we ever had a product to sell. As a freemium sort of bottoms-up product and company at the core, we recognized we needed to not just put a product in market, but we needed to educate our customers, activate them, and support them all along their journey. And that would create sales leverage in the future. It would create success on the sales side and the retention side. And so we got ahead of that problem, and both in proactive account management and onboarding, but also sort of reactive support, and staffed those organizations aggressively, built tools to enable the reps to be successful, and then brought on great leaders like John to go and scale those operations. And that investment has been absolutely critical to the growth that we have experienced. We've gone from a few thousand trucks in our network, a few thousand licenses, so to speak, to now hundreds of thousands. And that growth would not have been possible if we had not both invested in process, tools, but also people on the success side. So we think it's really critical. I'm honored to host this here tonight for that reason, and I will turn it over now to John, who cares deeply about this stuff, and he will get started.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thanks so much, Shoaib, and yeah, thanks KeepTruckin for hosting us. So this is really fun. We've got an amazing panel here tonight. Not only are these guys all world-class venture capitalists, but each of them have had a ton of success in their careers on the operations side. So they really know both sides of the table. And when we're planning this event, we thought it would be cool to lift the hood and understand that other side of the table. Most of us in this room work for companies that are venture capital backed. If we're with early stage companies, potentially we're seeking VC funding. So again, VC, big part of the ecosystem that as customer success professionals, we're all a part of. So let's do it. So we've got an amazing panel here. My experience with interviewing world-class talent is they never brag about just how impressive they are. So I'm going to take a chance to brag about your backgrounds just a little bit. So I'm going to start with Naomi. All right. So Naomi is an investing partner at Menlo Ventures. Prior to joining Menlo, she was VP of Growth at Invoice2Go, and prior to that, she was at Evernote, where she founded the growth team there. Really impressive statistics here. Led that growth team from 10 million active users to 100 million active users. Wow. So really impressive. She's also a sought-out advisor in the startup community, working with Reforge and 500 startups, and really just like getting started in venture capital, right? Moving from the operations side to VC. So really cool perspective we have. All right, jump down to Ilya. Ilya, so again, really cool background on the operations side. I guess you didn't get your start, but really, big story was at Dropbox, right? One of the early hires in before 50 people at Dropbox, led that team in both product roles and corporate development roles until the company was over 1,500?
About 15.
Yeah, about that. Cool. And then on the VC side, prior to joining Kleiner recently.
A week and a half ago.
A week and a half ago, he was at Index Ventures, where he led investments with Intercom, who we all know, Janan's company, Optimizely, of course, KeepTruckin, give KeepTruckin a shout out, and then everybody's favorite, Slack. So just a ton of knowledge here to share.
Lots of customer success from those.
Lots of customer success. And then last but not least, Roseanne. Roseanne is at IVP, really working with a whole breadth of different companies. So observer on the board of Masterclass. Anybody ever taken a Masterclass course yet? Cool.
Highly recommend.
Highly recommend. And then at IVP, also working with Compass, Glossier, and TransferWise, which as a Canadian, I use all the time. And then prior to IVP, K&N Partners, right? So at K&N...
Where we met.
Pardon?
Where we met.
That's where we met, actually, yeah. At my previous company, I actually pitched. So that was kind of cool. She didn't invest. She didn't invest in me. Yeah. It's cool. We got to know each other. But
This is your chance to grill her back, right?
yeah, this is payback. Watch out. But she did invest in really great companies such as Beacon, Stayful, and MetaCloud, which was acquired by Cisco. And then tons of product background as well. So there we go. So there's the introductions. All right, so first thing I want to start with is one of the pieces of feedback that we always get every single meetup is making sure that we're catering to the audience and making sure that we're giving advice that's contextual to everybody in the room. So what I want to do is I want to just do a show of hands. Who's in an early stage company? So let's define this as, let's say, less than $1 million or $2 million in ARR, kind of still figuring out what the company is all about. Okay, right on. So let's move up a little bit. You've got some customers, let's say less than $10 million in ARR. You're starting to scale the business. Things starting to become, an oiled machine. So who's in that camp? Okay, great. And then after that, we'll call this scale. You're really scaling the thing. It's growth. So let's say, north of $20 million in ARR, up to $100 million, that magic $100 million in ARR. Who's in that camp? Okay, cool. And then last, anybody at a company that is IPO'd or really late stage? Very cool. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful. Now we're going to turn it over to you guys. Let's talk about your funds a little bit. Where do you get involved with companies? Want to start at this end?
Sure.
We'll start late and we'll go down. Yeah.
One thing that John didn't mention, because I think when we were making these questions, we hadn't announced it yet, but we actually led the most recent round in KeepTruckin that we announced yesterday. We're really excited. So yeah, IVP, congratulations to these guys. We led the $50 million Series C. And so I'm at IVP. We're a late stage fund. We invest, typically in companies that have at least $10 million of revenue or $10 million of run rate. And really, it's we go as late as we can. We buy at IPOs. We can buy in the public market. So we're actually also a crossover investor. What was the other part of the question? Sorry.
Where do you get involved with companies?
Oh, so I would say the biggest place that we get involved personally is around hiring. So, generally the companies that we invest in, we're investing because things are working. And a lot of times also there's a lot of great investors around the table, like Ilya, who led the KeepTruckin Series A. He should really get the round of applause. But usually things are working, and we kind of think about it as first do no harm. So we don't want to inject ourselves too aggressively in something that's in a business that actually knows what they're doing. And rather, a lot of times when we invest, the company's reaching another scale, and so how do we help them, expand roles and bring in new talent and really get ready for the next step, right? How do you get ready to, think about going public or go out or be a public company or start acquiring others? So that's kind of how we get involved. In the most part, but really we think about growth. And you mentioned I work with a lot of different types of companies. We're all generalists. We all do enterprise and consumer. And frankly, I think it's because a lot of companies at this stage have the same problems, regardless of if they sell to if they're selling to companies or if they're selling to individuals. And so we try to be experts in that. I mean, when I was thinking about customer success, I kept thinking about Glossier, which is a consumer company, but success and customer service is so integral to that business, and the way they think about it, I think, is very nuanced and smart, and they frankly have one of the best customer success leaders I've ever worked with, this woman, Jess White.
Questions here.
Sorry. Okay, I'll save this for later. Naomi.
No, I love it though. I love it. Naomi.
Great. I recently joined Menlo Ventures as a partner about 6 weeks ago. So, a week and a half in, 6 weeks in, we're new kids on this side of the stage. But we are in our 14th fund, $450 million fund. We invest across stage, across sector. So we'll do seed to growth. I come from the operating background, really heavy product and growth expertise. So my focus area has been how to get customers to stay and pay. So really the productized version of what a lot of you guys are doing. And so I've been building these full stack growth teams that think about the whole user funnel and really marry the qualitative of what we're hearing from customers, as well as the quant experimentation and predictive analysis to know who we think might churn, when, and how to keep driving expansion revenue. So I can get involved at all stages of that. I think it's getting customers to stay and pay is something, no matter how long the company's been around, it's something that's top of mind. So that's how I tend to get involved.
Cool. Thanks. So I'm now at Kleiner Perkins for about a week and a half, as has been said. We're a pretty general venture capital firm. We have a venture fund, which is about $500 million, and a growth fund that's about $1 billion. So we invest across all stages. Personally, I'm more focused on venture, though I'll do a little bit of growth as well, primarily around companies that sit in the middle between consumer and enterprise. So companies like Intercom and Slack and Dropbox that really value customer success as a core part of what they do, which is why this is a really exciting panel for me to be on. In terms of involvement, we support companies pre-revenue all the way through early stage and late stage revenue, help with recruiting, help with company building, product building, and really general advice. A lot of us have seen companies through various stages of life. In terms of sectors, I think the only thing we don't invest in is clean tech at this point, so we cover pretty widely.
Okay, cool. So now we get to know the panel. So let's talk growing a company from the very beginning through to IPO. What are you looking at each stage of growth? Like, let's start at the beginning and let's go all the way. What are the numbers that matter? Or maybe that comes in even later. So I don't know where to start. Who wants to?
I can add something. One thing that I've looked at, and when I thought about joining Evernote and Invoice2Go, this was really relevant. It's a really efficient go-to-market. So I look at Evernote didn't spend $1 in paid acquisition my entire tenure there. So up to 100 million users didn't pay for them. Just word of mouth, visibility in App Store. It was just something that worked and people were willing to talk about. Invoice2Go became the top grossing business app in the App Store in over 50 countries without investing in sales and marketing. So pure painkiller products that can get to market. Leveraging mobile was that new distribution channel that really helped get these companies off the ground. And wow, what a way to prove kind of getting into double-digit million MRR without an advertising budget. Pretty amazing.
Cool. I think in addition to that, what I focus on personally and what we try to look for is really the team and the tenacity of the team, and I think that's frankly why I invested in KeepTruckin at the Series A, even though they were burning a lot of money on customer support for no revenue. But they had a big vision and they had the tenacity to go pursue that. So that's probably one of the first things we look for. Obviously, big markets that you're tackling at the early stage, and for me, a nuanced thought or something that's not obvious, because it's easy to come in and look at a space and say it's not interesting or it's not big enough. But when you look a little bit further and you found a founder who's got a unique insight that gives you an initial wedge, and then that wedge grows into something really big, that's when the magic happens. And beyond that, obviously, it's the ability to tell stories. I think the founders who tell compelling stories can build compelling teams. They can talk to customers in compelling ways. They can listen to their customers in reciprocity and take that feedback and put it back into their product. So it's the raw ingredients that I think you need to build a successful business. And obviously, as things grow, you look for revenue, you look for revenue markers, efficient go-to-market models, something, again, that's a little bit unique that will allow this company to really be the winner takes all in its particular space.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about like later stage. That was early. Let's go later.
Yeah, and so I would say, when companies get to our stage, we're thinking a lot about metrics, frankly, and digging into sales metrics, especially because a lot of times, like, sales and marketing is where most of the growth capital is going. And so, when we're considering an investment, is that machine working, right? Like, do we want to pour dollars into that machine? Because it's a really easy way to spend a lot of dollars if the machine is not working. And I think, we look at, things like, payback, and we spend a lot of time with magic number on the sales side, but then on the success side, we think a lot about retention and frankly, and negative, like, or whatever net churn is. Because if you think about, expansion and companies that have really great expansion metrics and are very good at that, it actually gives you a ton of flexibility on the sales side, right? Like, I feel like if a company can show me that they're actually going to expand, like one of my companies, enterprise company called Caufield, they've expanded like some of their cohorts 6x over their lifetime, right? Like, we feel pretty good about like spending more sales and marketing if we know that if we get people in the door, they'll spend 6x in year 4 than they did in year 1, right? And so it actually gives you a ton of flexibility. And so I think the companies that actually have built that like into the sales and marketing system, and also being really thoughtful about how they compensate that team and also like where exactly they sit, can just give themselves a ton of leverage as they grow. And I think the sooner the companies do that, the better off they are. Because it always takes optimizing, right? And every company is slightly different, and how you comp the teams is slightly different, and figuring it out early can pay off massively when you get to our stage.
Cool. So we talked a little bit about numbers around sales and retention, even magic number. That's cool. Just side note, maybe explain for the audience what is magic number. So
magic number is the amount of revenue you book in a quarter compared to the amount of, or actually we do it on a gross profit basis. So the amount of gross profit you book in a quarter compared to the previous quarter's sales and marketing, and you can kind of change that depending on how long sales cycle is and things like that, if there's implementation time. But it's a good marker of seeing how efficient the sales dollars are. And in companies that are growing really fast, like, magic number can be low, and that's okay if you really feel good about that payback. One thing I love seeing actually in companies is that like magic number does like a sawtooth over time, right? That you see like sales starts working, so magic number ticks up, and then you hire a bunch of salespeople because it's working, so it goes down, and then it ticks back up, and it goes down, and it ticks back up. And so seeing that a company has those reps that they've been able to, recognize that like their sales function is working, it's time to expand it, they make that investment pays off, they do it again, like that's something we get super excited about because that tells me that like this company knows how to spend sales dollars. Like I want to give that company sales dollars to spend.
Very cool. So what about like maybe softer numbers? So we talked about like revenue-related numbers and retention numbers. What about like NPS? NPS, I think I read a Jason Lemkin quote, who I'm sure everybody's on Twitter following Jason Lemkin, and he said, if you have an NPS of 60, that will boost your valuation. Is that a myth? Is that real? Is that true? Anyone going to take a stab?
I think most successful customer-oriented organizations really think hard about NPS. In fact, Slack in the early days had a really strong focus on NPS. By the way, they didn't really have a sales team. The customer success team was the sales team. It evolved into a sales team. I think the same thing is frankly true of early Dropbox. Same thing is true of Intercom. These customer success teams wind up becoming effectively the selling machine. And so the NPS metric is a really relevant one because it just tells you how well you're interacting, not only with people you're servicing on the service side, but also people you're selling to on the customer side. I think, in my view, every deck, most of the decks I see today have an NPS score, and I think it's really not the point in time that matters. I think at some point you can hit a really high NPS depending on how you measure things. But it's the consistent tracking of the NPS and what you do with that metric. In many ways, I find a lot of times it becomes a lagging indicator rather than a leading indicator. And so I think if you're relying on NPS as the go-to metric, you might miss things out. So what I try to do is push companies to break the NPS score down. So there's an overall NPS, but what's the NPS for customers who are paying versus not paying? If it's an enterprise company, what's the NPS for admins of companies that are paying companies that are paying versus companies that are not paying? What's the NPS for people in a particular geo, and how is that evolving over time? So that you can start seeing how what you build on the product side or what you implement in practices and organizationally actually affects your business. And then obviously, I think along with NPS, the thing that I care about a lot for most companies is just the engagement with the product. So NPS is great, but I think activity metrics, customer activity metrics, along with NPS will really tell you the true story.
Yeah, I'm curious, Naomi, do you have anything to add to that? Just like the experience at Evernote, I'm sure it was all
Definitely.
about activity.
So I think, growth teams live or die by the rapid experimentation, and we end up being sucked in these spreadsheets and reports on how things are performing and getting really reactive. But one thing that I've always done is I've always had a user researcher on my full stack growth team. So qualitative research has always been part of how we functioned. I expect it from the PMs and designers and marketers on my team, but you get a lot of leverage when it's somebody's sole job. And you can centralize all those learnings and get this longitudinal study, like Ilya was alluding to with the NPS over time. So we're constantly doing a systematic approach to surveys, interviews, feedback loops across the business with other departments. So I would do a monthly lunch with our customer operations team, and I'd give them a topic that was really top of mind for the growth team, and we'd sit and just get the customer voice. They were talking to the customers day in and day out, and I wanted my team to hear it. And so I'd bring them along into the process, and some of our most transformational experiments came from insights that we got from our customer operations team. So qualitative research really fueled how we did growth, and a lot of success came from it.
Can I also say one thing about NPS? I think Naomi has a really good point here where I feel like we see a ton of decks that have NPS in it, but I love doing surveys. I do a ton of survey work when I do investments, especially on the consumer side. And when I go and do NPS, it's always lower than what the company says. And that's not bad. We expect that, right? But that's because I do think if it's a really a metric that you track, you have to also think about what the bias is when you're collecting that data, right? Because if you only do it at the end of a support interaction, right? And you have great support, yes, that's going to boost NPS, but you're not capturing anybody who's actually not reaching out to support. If you do it at in a consumer company, in a purchase confirmation email, you're only getting people who made it all the way to the bottom, and they're probably more excited about the product than somebody who didn't even open the email. And so I think having a bunch of methods, if it's really something that you track, is really important, because I think just only having one channel for NPS, like, it's so great because it's like such an easy piece of data to collect, but like there's so much bias in the method of collection that I think you have to be pretty rigorous about it.
So we're going to shift gears a little bit here. So we talked about, investing in companies, the metrics that matter. We want to take things again higher level. You guys have a unique vantage point on what's happening in the world of customer success and startups and things of that nature. So I think everybody in the room here is probably reading Gainsight's blog. All of us are really grateful for the content that they're creating. I think all of us probably appreciate how they've elevated even the title of customer success. They raised $150 million, I believe. And I know there's competitors to Gainsight out there, but you don't see the competitors raising the same amount of dollars. What's that all about? Does that tell us anything about the career choice that we've all made?
I mean, I've looked at that business a bunch of times and never invested, probably to my detriment. But one thing that I think is above all is Nick Mehta is amazing at branding, and he really did such a good job of creating, frankly, the category and owning this idea. And I remember their early conference that they had around customer success and getting the customers up there. It was amazing. They've really, I think he's frankly a branding genius, because he really created kind of a new support and services and everything always existed, and even the term success. But I think they did such a good job of owning it and frankly making it sexy that really I see that as phenomenal branding that other enterprise companies should really look towards. I'm very impressed by it.
I mean, I think, I'm not sure about Gainsight specifically, but in general, the category of customer-oriented companies, I think, is becoming quite relevant. I was an investor in Intercom. Luckily, Kleiner Perkins invested in Intercom after me, so I get to stay as an investor in Intercom post-transition. But that's an example of a company that's really customer-focused. Obviously, they're building tools that help other companies to be customer-centric and interactive, but it is really at the core of the company's DNA. And in fact, the company was born out of this insight where Owen and Des and the co-founders used to hang out at a coffee shop in Dublin, and they saw that in this particular coffee shop that they went to, baristas knew all the customers by name, and the customers kept coming back because they had this highly personalized, tailored experience. And that was really the genesis of the thinking behind the Intercom product, is that everybody should have that level of customized kind of Cheers level, everybody knows your name, tailored experience across any digital property or any digital service that they're interacting with. And they wanted to bring the tools of the barista who happened to memorize that you like, double shot lattes with whipped cream to any online business. So I think we'll see more and more of that, primarily because I think it was discussed before, Naomi, it really becomes daunting to spend a lot of acquisition dollars on getting customers, whether you're a consumer or an enterprise business. So ideally what you try to do is create leverage on those dollars, and the best way to create leverage on those dollars is word of mouth. Right? If you look back at the growth trajectory of most successful companies, Dropbox included, you'll see that in the early days, a vast disproportionate number of people came into the service because of word of mouth. Obviously, on top of that, you can build things virality, referral programs, but it all starts with a great experience people have with either your product or the service that they're interacting with.
Cool. So even actually, doubling down on that topic of these tools that help customer success professionals, last month we were at WalkMe, and we see kind of this capital flowing into onboarding tools and things to help optimize the flow of how customers move around the product. When you're advising companies, and we see this, these companies popping up that help with this, would you advise a company to, go buy something like WalkMe to help with onboarding and activation, or does that say that maybe there's a fundamental flaw in that product and they should actually go back and look at actually how the UI and the UX all fits together? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yes to all of it. We talk about activation. This is, it's that, how do you get that habit formation, right? That's when a customer has the most intent. They came, they actively registered or download your app. They want this to work for them. And so it's a big missed opportunity to not capture them during that in-product experience. So I do spend a ton of time, in the past I've spent a ton of time overhauling onboarding flows, but also advising companies on onboarding. And I think about the full funnel, and I very much a retention first kind of growth person of, if this isn't doing the job that the customer wanted and you're not seeing retention and revenue actually increase over time, cohort over cohort, then there's probably something wrong with the product. And as far as customer success, I mean, man, like we think about it so much. I was at a board meeting yesterday where, so we had the new VP of Sales was presenting and started a few months ago, and I just hired a bunch of AEs, and they're just closing deals. I mean, just Fortune 500 companies, six-figure deals. There's like high-fiving around the table, and then immediately, like in the same breath, the conversation went to, what are we doing about customer success? Because it wasn't enough to just celebrate these wins and getting these numbers on the board. It was, are these people going to stay? Are they going to be happy? Are they going to pay us more over time? And so the reality of, oh man, we just filled our funnel, we just filled our pipeline, hit everybody just right there in the middle of the board meeting. So very much top of mind of your work's not done yet.
Right. And how much of that, like I often think of, everybody has, on this panel, has experience in consumer-facing or SMB customers. How much of that trickles upstream, as you move into the enterprise, where maybe you can apply more people to solve problems? Do you see it trickle up or it trickle down, as companies move up market and take great habits that they developed as, maybe working with SMB and bring that into the enterprise? Ilya, I feel like you're ready to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality is big customers pay more money and expect better service. So in fact, customer success becomes even more important for larger customers. It can be a potentially revenue generating part of the business, although that's not great revenue for services, obviously, because it's not recurring, it's spot. But Optimizely is a great example. I think as you go to bigger and bigger customers, they want more handholding, they expect better customer success. I remember Dropbox, when we got our first large enterprise customers, we realized, hey, we actually have to have somebody who answers the phone when they call. You can't just send them to a website and have them read the FAQ. So I think it becomes even more important as you go bigger. And I think, one thing I'm seeing is that there is a wave of interesting companies now that are really blending engineering and success, especially when it comes to integration. So the same thing that's happened on sales engineering is happening on success, where success teams have to be technically savvy. And I think it's going to be an ever-increasing trend.
Cool. All right, so the fun question now. What's getting you guys excited right now? You guys get to hear pitches all day long and lift the hood on all sorts of different companies. So just what's getting you excited? What trends are making you smile?
Trucking is a great trend. No, but I can start. I mean, I think for me, but I say it only half in jest. I think we here in Silicon Valley and San Francisco live at the tip of the spear of technology, right? I think everything we have today is incredibly automated. We have services for everything, including onboarding. But when you're in kind of the rest of the country, the real world, I think you're very far away from this state of the world. I think there are vast industries out there, a lot of them in financial services, a lot of them in transportation and logistics, a lot of them in real estate, where technology is not really permeated. And that's an opportunity to build horizontal solutions like what KeepTruckin is doing in transportation, and then unlock a lot of the data that sits in these silos and then build network effect businesses and marketplace businesses on top of that. And that's something that I'm pretty excited about, given that I have nothing in my portfolio right now.
I'll add, very similar. I think just really broken, inefficient workflows, being able to solve that with technology and have it become the system of record. It's just how people function. It's how they do their job. Again, that's getting to the retention and revenue grows over time because people become so addicted, they can't imagine life without it, and the willingness to pay and perceived value can increase because of that. Those are the types of businesses I love.
Yeah, I know. Like to Ilya's point, I always think about that as I think about these step 2 businesses, right, where you can build this really interesting business, but then through building that business, you also build a really interesting data set that allows you to do so much more. And I really love working with businesses like that, like with KeepTruckin and Compass is another one that makes me super excited. Also, I came from I was at a retail conference the past 2 days, and just actually really thinking about like we have so many new direct-to-consumer brands, and so many of them are like slap a cool like red antler designed website on something and like make it sexy. But I think the ones that are really breaking out are the ones that like really think about the customer and how to like brand all of those touch points and how you're so much more than how you look. I think like it's all about like creating these like special experiences, and I think that's so true in all of these businesses, both consumer and enterprise. I think like we're at this point where we have like so much technology and we're all generating all this interesting proprietary data for our business, and like you can use it in so many ways, whether it's like monetizing that data or using it to just provide a way better experience for your customer. It's an exciting time.
Very cool. Okay, so we're going to start to wrap up here. But just, we started with great introductions, and everybody has such a broad experience on both sides of the table. I imagine there's so many skills that you guys have developed over the years that have followed with you as you built your careers and entered this world of VC. So we've got all sorts of people in the room. We've got people who are just getting started. We've got people who are leading teams. We've got maybe people who are trying to get into customer success. So what are some skills that maybe the audience can be developing that can take them places and have a great career like you guys have had?
Well, I mean, I think there are many skills you'll pick up along the way, especially I think we have small companies, medium-sized companies, very large companies represented here, and operating in those involves a lot of personal growth around interactions with people, around communication, around, again, storytelling, around management. I think for me, the thing that's been constant in my career is really learning. I've always optimized for that. I think I've always jumped into roles or career paths where I almost felt like the opportunity is bigger than what I can handle, and it made me stretch to learn and develop a certain skill set. It's almost like jumping into the deep end of the pool and trying to swim. So I'd encourage you to do that as much as you can. And with that, I think, especially as you're in startups, especially as you're in high growth, kind of early stage startups, your peer set's probably, as experienced or inexperienced as you are, right? And I think in many ways, a lot of it is either finding mentorship within the organization or finding mentorship outside of the organization. So somebody who's been in your role, but maybe at a later stage, maybe 2 stages ahead, who can be a sounding board and a mentor, because as you grow through your career path, it gets a little lonelier and lonelier at the top. And so you want to surround yourself with advisors. And I think as VCs, that's kind of the role that we try to play for companies. We try to be the advisors and the folks who've seen it before, either through our careers or in other portfolio companies or generally in the industry, to help the management team, the executive team, and the rest of the organization scale.
Yeah, something that's really served me well is being data and user driven. I think the data is going to tell you what happened. It's not going to tell you why. So you guys are already doing this by being so customer centric and being the customer's advocate, telling those stories, bringing those narratives to the decisions that might just be made over a spreadsheet. So it's on you to really make sure that those feedback loops are in place and that everyone's hearing the customer voice. Another thing I'd say is take initiative. I think about how you can work on the most high impact thing at the company. What's keeping your boss up at night, your boss's boss, your boss's boss's boss. Find ways to kick off new projects or work on the things that you feel like you're going to have the most impact at the organization.
Yeah, one of my CEOs always says, the main thing is keeping the main thing, right? Like always just like being like hyper focused around like what actually matters, because there's so much noise like in all of our jobs and all of our lives, and just like cutting that out. But I think also to Ilya's point, like, or both of your points, like always be listening, like always be learning and always be listening to other people. Like I feel like every investment I've made is because of like something that somebody said to me or something I learned like years ago that like stuck with me, that like we made this investment in Looker, and like I remember when I had to go ask the DBA for data, and like I had this amazing DBA, and then he left, and the new DBA was terrible and would never give me my data, and like I felt that pain. And I remember after I left the company, like the person who like took over my job was like ready to quit because it was so painful to get data because she couldn't do her job. And like, just like, that stuck with me for so long that like years later, I was like, well, that's a feeling I want to invest in. So like, I think just like being really, like always learning and being really open to like what other people are telling you, because they're also like, one thing that's so exciting about being here is that like you're surrounded by smart people who are like thinking about new and different things all the time, and just like being a sponge of that, because I feel like it informs so many other parts of your life.
All right, and then the last question, what news should our audience here, deliver back to their CEO? So we gave them advice for their own personal growth, sitting on the boards, meeting with all kinds of CEOs. What's a note that we should put on our CEO's desk? It's for you, Shoaib.
Hire like the biggest, smartest people you can, and the main thing is keeping the main thing, like literally. I think about Stitch Fix a lot. Like Katrina did such an amazing job there, and I think to her credit, like one of the best things she did is she hired like, I also don't know how she did it in some ways. She hired such incredible executives, like when her company was so early, and surrounded herself with like amazing people, and then she got out of their way. And I think that so much of that company's success is because of that, is she shared great people and she trusted them.
I mean, I would say you should get your CEO to do customer success for a day. I'm actually serious. It's interesting because I think at the early stage, every CEO, sits on the, company or whatever, help at, support at email address and sees all the customer feedback. And as things goes on, you hire people to take care of that, and you become a little bit further removed from the customer. You still listen, but eventually you're very far away removed from the customer, and I think you can lose sight of the day-to-day needs of your customers and the people you're providing the services to. And I think it's really important to bring that back. In fact, Dropbox at some point, we wound up doing customer breakfasts with the core part of the executive and management team once a week for different customer types, because we wanted to bring that interaction back. But early days, we all sat on this one inbox of all the customer complaints. And when you see that, you inherently react and listen to the customer. So I think I do that.
Sir, can I interrupt quickly just on that point? TransferWise, everyone in the company does support tickets every month. I think it's like at least 2 hours a month. Even like engineers, CEO, everyone. And it's actually phenomenal for making engineers take support calls, because it tells you what functions don't work, right? Like, and there's a cost, right? Like, because there's a real cost to like every time somebody picks up the phone. And so how do you build that into the product so that nobody picks up the phone for that problem?
Yeah, I think empathy, right? I mean, that's the word here of how can everyone in the business have empathy for the end customer. And one thing you can do that's really tangible is when you have a big win, when you have some way of quantifying something that the customer success team has done to drive expansion revenue, to increase a happier user base, find a way to capture that and celebrate it. There's so much hard work that can go lost, but find a way to track it and send that message up to the top.
Very cool. All right, so guys, we're going to get into questions in a second here, but we have to do a public service announcement before we do. So we're always planning our panel. So next month, we're going to be at Autodesk, and we're going to try something new. We're going to get 3 people from the community to actually help us out and present. So what we're going to be doing is quarterly business reviews are a big thing in all of our business. Certainly like on the enterprise side and the mid-market side, quarterly business reviews are a big deal. And we want to lift the hood on your quarterly business reviews. So we're looking for 3 volunteers to share really awesome quarterly business reviews that you're doing in your business. So that'll be next month. So everybody has a piece of paper on their seat, so when you fill out the NPS score, because we wouldn't be doing our job as customer success people if we didn't do NPS, also nominate or volunteer yourself to help us out next month. All right, so here we go. I know everybody's sitting on their hands. They have lots of questions for the panel. So who's going to start us off? All right, yeah, here, we'll do the mic.
I love mics, thank you. Naomi, you touched on something that I ask myself every day, which is how do you capture and quantify a customer success? So can you give me a story where that happened?
Yeah. And I have to qualify this by saying that my experience with customer success has really been productized. So my teams have owned retention and revenue from a growth product standpoint. So for us, it was a little easier because we'd run an experiment and we'd do something around our pricing and packaging or targeting, personalization, and we'd be able to quantify it quite easily. But so I think it is a little bit harder when it is more of a high-touch experience here. But I'll tell you a little anecdote of something that one of our portfolio companies did, and I'll have to get back to you on how they packaged this up and reported on it, but I think it was a really cool test. So this company, what they did was, as soon as they locked down a new customer, they told them, they said, so this is Signified, they do fraud prevention for e-commerce companies. And so when new customers came into the funnel, they would say, give us your messiest, gnarliest problem. They called it the garbage man approach. Give us just like the messiest problem, your messiest customer, your messiest logs. We're going to dig in and figure stuff out for you. We're going to find insights. We're going to help you fix it. So it was very much a proactive approach of increasing time to value and making sure customers are happy out of the gates, and rather than waiting to be reactive. And so I think that was a cool way to have like a very focused project and say, we're going to do this for a series of customers and see what it gets us. So you can think of things at a more higher order kind of experiment of saying, like, for some period of time, we're going to do this approach, and we're going to compare that as a cohort relative to another period of time. So it might be less scientific than some of the experiments my team has run, but I think those are some ways to just try things and see what kind of results you get over time.
Who's up next?
Thank you. So first to plug CS, Meetup, SF. It's been an awesome opportunity to learn about the customer success world. And about a year ago, I was the guy standing up saying, I'm looking for a job, and now I'm the guy standing up saying, I'm hiring, so awesome. But my question's more toward the VC side and understanding more from your perspective, what technologies and industries are you excited about that you're looking to invest in, and how does CS fit into some of those realms?
Sure, I'll take this one. So I think as a fund, as a venture fund, we look at a pretty broad set of technologies and sectors. I mean, everything from consumer and e-commerce all the way to deep enterprise software around security and infrastructure and productivity and verticals like financial services and healthcare, et cetera. So we're pretty broad in what we do. Personally, obviously, I focus on a subset of that, which is kind of the intersection of consumer and enterprise. I think, to me, though, the question of the role of customer success is pretty universal, right? I think anytime a business interacts with its customers, whether it's a human assistant or non-human assistant interaction, you generate a customer experience that can create growth or death for your business. So I think as a core part of the focus, it's really important. I think it plays just different roles throughout the growth stages of the organization and the company. I think early on, in many ways for me personally, customer success and a focus on customer success is really a focus on product. Like, it's the best way to learn about your product is by talking to your customers. And again, you can do that through humans, or you can do that through digital means, product like Intercom or otherwise. As you grow, I think success takes on a bigger role because you're now talking about a fraction of revenue, or a pretty large fraction of revenue that's potentially going to churn or expand. And I think in many companies that I see today, again, whether it's a Slack or an Intercom or a Dropbox, success is actually the early sales team. So success goes from kind of, for me, a more product-oriented function to a very much revenue-oriented function, and I think it's critical in that regard. And it's true, I think, I can't think of a single vertical where that's not true, actually.
I have kind of actually a similar question, specifically related to legal tech. So I come from a previous lawyer, escaped that world to join customer success. And so I just have kind of an academic interest in legal tech. And I'm wondering if you guys have seen any legal tech companies, invested in them, and why do you think they're kind of slow to make these changes compared to a lot of other industries?
I mean, I'm not an investor in any legal tech companies, but a few come to mind. I mean, there's a company called Atrium, which is actually in the current,
hottest YC
which
deal
is in the
this
current
year.
Y Combinator batch. It's they're building a technology-enabled legal firm, and I think that goes all the way from kind of paralegal to deeply legal work. A company called Simple Legal, which is helping larger enterprises manage their contracts. And I think historically, I think it's back to a little bit this point around. There are many different verticals that exist out there that have been largely untouched by technology, because technology's sort of been permeating. It's driven by a few things. I think for legal specifically, it's really the ability to digitally understand documents, right? It's language processing. It's being able to take a set of contracts and break it down into a set of rules, and then add the human element to it, which is a little bit of the gray area, the subjectivity of how you interpret different clauses. And I think historically that's been a little bit hard to do, and I think now it's becoming more possible. And that's where a company like Atrium is combining this digital approach with a human approach, where you still have humans, but now you're taking humans and you're spending these valuable human hours on making the gray area decisions, and the simple things that are machine interpretable, you just get it done with a machine. So I think there's actually going to be a pretty interesting future for legal tech and other similar types of services where, whether it's tax prep or it's bookkeeping or it's other verticals like insurance, where folks have relied on human labor. And in many ways, I'd say trucking is similar. You relied on human brokers to manage contracts and manage logistics, where you can start automating parts of that work.
Yeah, like how I think about it a lot is like there are certain things that computers are really good at, and there are certain things that people are really good at. And I think we're going to see more and more companies and spaces that tend to be very high touch, and that it's probably going to be a lot of services that look like they're tech enabled, where there's a lot of tech that's doing the rote stuff that frankly is the worst, kind of most boring part of that job, but the people doing the kind of like counseling part, or the like deep customer empathy part is is done by people, and that frankly the tech really frees up a lot of their time to do things like that. So I think I agree, we're gonna see more. Also, like LegalZoom was one of ours, and it's
a good one.
Big business, yeah.
Hi, yes. I'm trying to change fields from a dinosaur industry into the tech industry, where it's not compatible to say, oh, I'm a business development manager, and now I'm a customer success manager. And with doing that, what's your best way to kind of be able to merge into that other industry?
What's the dinosaur industry?
I'm in transportation. I work for Peterbilt. So until they mandated the ELDs, I can guarantee you no trucking outfit would have been like, oh, we're going to do electronic logs. They would have not done that. But like I said, now I'm just trying to. I have wings. I'm trying to fly. So I'm trying to figure out what's the how would you go?
I think KeepTruckin is hiring.
Yeah, I know. There's a giant smile on Shoaib's face back there. So, but like, go like. There are areas that you have deep subject matter expertise. Like, go to those areas, right? Just because you don't understand tech does not mean you don't understand like how the underlying industry that they're serving works, and that's super valuable information, right? Like, leverage your knowledge and leverage your experience. Like, I wouldn't say like go do like something like deep infrastructure that has nothing to do with what you did before, but if you really understand trucking.
Yeah, I mean, I think if customer success or sales related roles are a great entry point in general, right? Because they leverage your human skills that you've probably developed in your current position. The only thing I'd say is when you look at modern technology companies, whether it's KeepTruckin or something else, I think there's just probably a set of tools that people use internally that they rely on, whether it's Salesforce or Slack or something else that you may not have been leveraging in your current organization, that you may want to get up to speed on, so that you can actually like fit into the infrastructure. But the value of like your deep knowledge and expertise and the human skills that you've built, that's incredibly transferable. Probably better than most folks who are doing it now, actually, right? Because you know something.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm going to jump in on that one too. When we're hiring for customer success at KeepTruckin, I'm telling the recruiting team to look for 3 things, and I usually think I can find 2 of those 3 things. When I find all 3 of them, I get really excited, but it's very, very rare. So the first is like that deep empathy for the customer. That's like height in basketball. I don't think you can even train for that. That's like baked into people. Point 2 would be deep domain expertise. So trucking industry, we're a company catering to trucking or truckers in the trucking industry. So deep domain expertise, when you find that, that's pretty cool. And then I always like people who understand kind of the business model, SaaS business, the annuity of that renewal every year is really important in our business, and understanding that it's more than just a one-time transaction, but it's a long-time relationship, and if we renew them and grow them every single year, we'll be successful. So if I can find all 3 of those things, that's my purple squirrel, but if I get 2 of 3, that's pretty good. And I think there was a question right here, a follow-on.
Ilya, just a quick follow-on from a previous comment. You said earlier that as companies grow, CS takes on a different role, like you start from being like a product-focused CS function to a kind of more revenue and business focus. What are some of the best practices that you guys have seen? So if you break down CS into the different like subcategories, what are some of the best practices you've seen really good companies of actually breaking down CS into different functions around like AE or training, onboarding? So, like, how do you think great companies break down the CS function?
I can start. I think, I agree with this point that it really starts with the product, and then you can think about revenue, because, coming from the retention first mindset was, I wanted to make sure that the product reached a point where people were sticking around, right? It wasn't a leaky bucket. People were happy. They were getting value from the product in perpetuity. And once we got to some threshold that we were really happy with, one thing we did was get our, it was our customer operations team, so it was our support team. We didn't have a formal customer success team, but what we did was carve off a group of them and say, how can you partner with the growth team and actually play an inside sales role? And we started thinking about expansion MRR and how they could play a role in driving upgrades. And so it's about, do we have that threshold where we feel like we've earned the right to talk about getting more money from people because they're satisfied user base? And then how could we enable that team to be fueled with the data and the strategies that we had to play a role? But I very much think you're asking for a lot to start extracting revenue from something that isn't working well, is buggy, doesn't do the job that a customer is looking for. So I completely agree with that. So have some goals for the business that you must hit before you can then shift that mindset.
I think, I think inherent in your question was a little bit like, how do you structure teams and how do they evolve over time? I mean, it's not too dissimilar from sales. I think you begin with generalists who can support the customer from beginning to end in their customer journey and from beginning to end in their product journey once they've onboarded to the product. And then you kind of refine that over time, whether you build a product specialist team that works with the product team and really delivers product insights inside, or somebody who supports the sales team in the sales process, or somebody who supports customers in their onboarding or difficult parts of the product journey. I think that really depends on your business and the kinds of products that you're delivering. But it's really just an evolution of scale, and it relates to really the pain points that customers experience before, during, or after using the product. And then you kind of structure it according to just the size and management and infrastructure of the organization, and then the needs of the internal teams that also need to get data from the customer.
All right, guys, we've got time for one more question. Emily? All right.
Thanks so much, guys. This has been really insightful. I want to just touch on, you mentioned the metrics that matter most are probably retention and expansion. One thing I'm very curious about is how you see CS leaders also justify the value brought from having successful and referenceable customers. Obviously, particularly when you're trying to go up market, that becomes even more important. And so how can a CS leader best quantify that? And Naomi, maybe you'll be the best person to take this because you mentioned the word of mouth with your 2 companies, Evernote and Invoice2Go. I know that's a bit more programmatic, but how can we do it?
How do you value having successful customers effectively?
Yeah, how do you quantify if you're in customer success, generating kind of customers who are successful, they have a great ROI? How does CS put some form of attribution to that?
How do we quantify the customer happiness driven by the customer success team?
Yeah, for example, if you know that, a higher win rate is obtained and you know the average deal size is X, and then, I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's a hard one. I think it touches on an earlier question of how can you do small experiments across the team where you're trying different strategies. I think, again, it's not going to be statistically significant. It's not going to be a true time-bound split test. But find ways to just push each other to try new things. And it might vary by channel. Like, we did a bunch of tests where, depending on the profile of the customer support person, who was good on phone versus email and chat, and what type of personality really fits to the channel and the metric that we're trying to move. And so we were very thoughtful when we did some experiments in partnership with the growth team around what metric we're trying to move, what experiment we thought would be a good way to test that hypothesis, and then who were the right people and the right channels to put against it over what period of time. So we tried to make it as systematic as possible, knowing that it's going to be small scale, but we tried all kinds of things, and the data's, maybe it's directional, but you're going to learn something. And so just applying that again and again and again.
And I have to say, I also see more and more companies that are moving retention and renewal into success, and even sometimes comping, or even success. People have having more and more of a quota, really looking more like a sales role, especially if it's a very big land and expand sale. And so I think, generally we see, success owning retention and sometimes expansion depending on how it's comped. But if it's big land and expand and those people are really selling, thinking about it as a somewhat sales role, right? There's a lot of nuance there, but I think if they're driving a lot of business, I have no problem comping them, comping success like sales.
The best way is to just get those success cases into a board deck for the board, and then we'll take care of the rest.
All right, guys, so let's give our panel a big round of applause. That was awesome. Thank you, guys. That was cool. So we've got a ton more food there, so stuff your pockets. There's a couple bottles of wine. Maybe leave those ones behind. We'll definitely do damage on those. But thanks, everybody, for coming out. Really appreciate everybody's time and the great questions. That was awesome. Thank you.